Okay. This next section is essentially going to be yours. There are two things I think we'd like to do here. One is to open the floor for comments and questions. The other is to have people reflect on what's around them. I mean, before you leave, you need to see the artifacts, the montages and collages that are all around us, and I think there'd be an opportunity to talk to Ujuri and also to Bonnie. But anyway, so there are two dimensions here that I want to make sure that people are conscious about. So the floor is open for comments and questions, and remember we have ruthless Phoebe Jones here to make sure you don't talk too long. So, floor is yours. Oh, right there.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Hill, and I do have a little map case going on, but it seems something like what's going on here. These are with children in DHS. I believe they're like incarcerated too, because you only get to spend a little time with them as visitation rights, you know what I'm saying? And I have two nieces, three of them now, that's in DHS, that I'm trying to get back. I've been fighting DHS for over a year to get them back with me and everything. And to me, they seem like they're incarcerated. They can't make no phone calls to me. I don't get to see them unless their visitations are set up for them. And if they act up and act out, then I don't get to see them, because it's like a punishment for them. So, you know, and I'm just saying, I got two kids in DHS that I've been fighting to get back. And I've been with every mother as a working mom. They've been with Mother's Network. They've been helping me throughout all this here. I've been to so many peoples, the commissioners, state reps, and all them other peoples. I've been protesting and everything. So I just want to let y'all know that these kids that's in DHS, they're incarcerated too, because they can't get out and get the freedom that they want. And then I don't know about their education, but they got these, my nieces, they're 2 and 3. They are in daycare all day long, all week, from 12 hours a day, I say. So, you know, I just want to let everybody know that what I'm going through is something just like people being in jail too. I just had 3 nieces incarcerated.
Thank you.
Yes, it is funny, really. Yes.
Sure, right there.
He's,
Hey, just over there.
Celine, I think you're
Right, right.
Tony.
Right.
Sorry. Ed will recognize you, so raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I really have enjoyed all the presentations. You know, I just thinking through this, you know, we always analogize the prison industrial complex either to the new Jim Crow or to slavery. But I would propose we're looking at something worse than slavery. This is a new type of confinement, oppression, and exploitation, which would suggest, you know, not that there's anything wrong with comparing it to chattel slavery, but we have to imagine that we could experience something worse than that. That might not have been the bottom of it. And if this is the case, we have to think about how we get out of this mess. This is a huge problem. There's just one other thing I wanted to say. You know, when the system of white supremacy reaches a certain stage of its decadence, when those who are upholding the system realize how acute the contradictions and problems are that they face, they become desperate. A lot of this is not the behavior of rational human beings, it's the behavior of desperate people who have been reduced to the lowest levels of savagery. And I think we have to portray and paint this picture for the world because at the end of the day, it will take a world movement. The American people are not capable alone of doing this. We have traditionally depended upon the spearhead to be the African American people. But in some ways, the African American people have been exhausted, and so much is happening to us. I don't see it coming from the American white population, the labor movement, any of the social movements, so-called progressive. We're not going to reform our way out of this. Either we end this in toto, or we don't end it at all. And therefore, it is going. And I don't mean to take too much time, but we have to look to the world movement. And our appeal has to also be made to the International Criminal Court. These prison officials and the people who are backing them up, yes, I'm finished, have to be prosecuted under international criminal law.
Good afternoon, I'm Reggie Abdul, Teresa, to everyone and all of the activists. It's always great to see the same people coming out what we need. Well, Tony is absolutely correct. This is an international crisis that we're living in. We must reach out across this planet Earth to get people involved. Russell Schultz, a very good friend of mine, has been in solitary confinement since 1977, except for a couple of years. I know that is a fact because Russell Schultz and I attempted to escape together. I attempted to escape. I wound up staying back on the block. But we have to address, let me make another point to the HRC was talking about what can we do to get people together to organize. Well, we have to organize in the state and across the country. We have to connect all of the dots. We certainly have to go into the schools to educate our children about what's going on. You know, I think it was last week I was informed that AFL-CIO put out some information that they were against mass incarceration, and that's good to hear. Mm-hmm. We have the public schools now saying that, well, we're against mass incarceration because we connected mass incarceration with the school to prison pipeline, and so the unions are saying, well, we want our jobs. Well, what we're going to say to the unions is that we don't want you faking us out because all of a sudden you want your jobs. We want you to have jobs too, but our children are first. Solitary confinement is absolutely no joke. It's torture. I remember being called nigger, boy, told we're going to kick your ass, Carter, we're going to come and get you, we're going to come get you. I had headaches for 3 days. 3 days. This is cool. When I came out of solitary confinement, I was so angry that it took some work for me not to strike out against guards because I really wanted to hurt somebody for telling me what they were going to do to me. And one time they did jump on me. It was kind of minor, but they still got physical with me, you know. So we certainly have to make our people aware. This is a global crisis that we're in. There's no joke.
Two panelists want to respond?
Well, in addressing Reggie's issue, I, a couple of years ago, was called to come to a prison and personally drive a prisoner who was being released. But he had been in solitary confinement so long that all of his letters to me stated that as soon as he's released, he's going to kill the first person in uniform. He's going to be back in prison. Anyone that stops him in that community that he returns to, he was going to gun them all down. He was going to kill every officer he had seen. And I had to personally go and meet this guy. I didn't even recognize him from the pictures he had sent me because solitary had changed his whole appearance. He had hair growing from everywhere. So, but now what I wanted to tell you is, when I go into the colleges and speak, they say, oh, prison should be there. What about these crimes that are going? Why are you behind people being abused? Because one day that person is going to be released into our communities. And that's why we should be concerned.
I just wanted to address something you said. I think one of the things that haunts me most is what I saw happen with Katrina. You said there's something worse than prisons. FEMA turned that auditorium into a concentration camp in 20 minutes. They sent the military there instead of social workers. And I don't think it's any accident that it happened to the Black and brown population. I don't think it's any accident that the targets we hit overseas are the same age and the same color as the war at home that's being conducted. Where I can't find an answer other than social revolution is that this system is not going to fall of its own weight, because there are very wealthy people making a whole lot of money off of it, and I don't know that that's separate from chattel slavery.
Jack?
My question is directed at Vicky Law, but maybe others could comment on it. The mass media often doesn't help us at all with any of this and only reinforces the worst. But recently there was this series called Orange is the New Black, which is at least being shown in a commercial setting with mass audiences about a women's prison in New York. Well, I guess it was Danbury. Could you talk about, or did you see it and read the book, and what you think the impact or where it might be a useful opening?
Well, I think it's a useful opening in that it brings the fact that there are women in prison to light, the fact that it's a lot of Black and brown women. But I mean, it's, you know, a TV series, it's entertainment. So there are these gross exaggerations of what goes on inside prisons. And then there are some outright distortions. So for anybody who is going to see the series and doesn't want a spoiler, walk out of the room right now. Like, you know, so one of the things that it, you know, addresses is the fact that there's one guard who male guard who very obviously takes advantage of the fact that he can watch you take your bra off. He can watch you in the shower. But then there's another episode in which a guard and a woman in the prison have what they call a quote-unquote consensual affair. Never mind the fact that, like, he has the power to make her life miserable if she doesn't do what he says. He can, you know, like, write her up, he can throw her in solitary confinement, he can make sure she doesn't get her food hot when it's supposed to be hot, cold when it's supposed to be cold, etc., etc., etc. So it ignores all those nuances. Then she gets pregnant, and she and a bunch of other women conspire to get the abusive guard framed for raping her. So so she and other women conspire so that she has sex with him, and an administrator walks in on them having sex, and she cries rape. So for people then who are new to thinking about prisons, it reinforces this idea that women in prison cannot be raped. They are conspiring, they are scheming, you know, like somehow they are not capable of being sexually assaulted when they say they are sexually assaulted. They're obviously not. So they're, you know, like, so while I welcome the idea that it brings the idea of women in prison into, like, the more general, you know, public perception, you know, there are huge distortions. But I think it's a good springboard for people to start introducing the idea of women's prison realities to the general public, so that way people have some idea, like, oh, none of these women are scary women. You know, it's all, like, they all have backstories. Some of them might be cliche and time-worn, but it's a way to start getting people to start thinking about the idea, but we have to push for more. We can't just rely on this one TV show to open people's minds and have them be like, oh, I guess we shouldn't have mandatory sentencing anymore. Like, that's not what's going to change people's minds. So we have to keep doing that work and using that to keep pushing.
How you doing? I'm Chaplain L. I'm from the Lava Space. I'm here represent HRC today. And everybody, I'm a strong advocate of institutions myself. What I mean is building institutions. A lot of times we complain about things, but we also have to build something. You got to build a better, you know, model if you don't want what you already got. Because, you know, until you build it, you don't have a new table to sit at. you know. So with the social justice thing myself, this year, April 4th, there's a new courtroom downtown. We have an interfaith court, and it's an establishment that we built, we opened it up. So it allows people to never have to use family court again, because they can come to their clergy, the pastors, the bishops, the imams, and handle any legal affairs. We've been circulating it throughout the city and City Hall and all the courts, and it's something that has been composed in such a way that none of the so-called powers that be can muster anything against it. So we have our own court, 12th and Vine, and we encourage you all to start to build other institutions, because if you don't like what you're getting, you're not going to get anything different unless you build something different, you know. So we're encouraging you all that are very passionate about, you know, the solitary confinement piece and everything, to start to build alternative justice systems. Because one thing is, this summer too, we've been working with municipal court and working with DHS, and I'd like to talk to the sister, who is the sister, you as well, because now that we have our own court, we have been calling DHS to get those children released to our court under our tutelage. But I can march all day, but if I don't have an institution when I go meet these people, then they still have that much resistance. So I think that we should press on, but we should begin to, because the brother said it's a global problem. I represent the indigenous peoples here in the city of Philadelphia, the Aboriginal people, and so the global problem is exactly what it is. The Occupy movement, I was very proud of the Occupy movement that they had in the United States, and then the Philly Occupy movement, but they danced around one issue, and that issue is that they had the General Assemblies, right? And they were voting in an organic way, but guess what, one thing they didn't do? They did not redistrict themselves. So what we're doing is, we have an organization called COVE, Confederation of Village Earth. And our thing is, you know, we must begin to do community self-government. Like, I'm from the Lava, it's called the Lancaster Avenue Autonomous Space. Autonomous means self-governing. So we must begin to govern ourselves again and redistrict our communities into villages again. You see, in the city and the state, they have to respect that. It may take y'all some time to catch up to that, but please, you know, think about building your institutions and replacing the things that you don't like. Because if you just march and protest about it, if we don't like it, we have to replace it. All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karen Lee. I'm with HRC. I'm also part of Decarcerate, and I have my own organization called SOLA, which is Saving Our Loved Ones. And one thing that Teresa spoke on or touched on, which I'm very passionate about and I'm committed against, is police abuse and corruption. And until we start talking about police corruption and the impact of it, then we're going to still have prisons being built. And I can say this from personal experience. I worked for the police department for 21 years. 17 of those years I was a court reporter. I took all the disciplinary hearings of sworn and civilian personnel. And I can go on record and say that for 17 years, from Monday through Thursday, no cop ever told the truth about anything. I don't care. It could be small, it could be large, okay? They lie about everything. And there's no accountability, there's no transparency. IAB, cops can't police cops. Police Advisory Commission can't do crack, they're ineffective. NAACP, ABC, you name it, no one talks about what goes on here in terms of police corruption. They go into court, they perjure themselves. I've taken hearings where a person has been snatched off the stand for lying, but cops never go to court for perjuring, as Mumia. So I'm saying, until we can start to talk about the reasons why people go to jail to begin with, we're going to still have this major problem. And one of it right now in Philadelphia and beyond is police corruption.
I'm Ross Reese, an attender at Germantown monthly meeting, just on the other side of the parking lot there. And my question is to try to say something mildly optimistic, maybe. And it's really more of a question, not anything that I have direct knowledge of. My question is, in view of the recent announced change in policy by the United States Department of Justice to try to reduce the number of prosecutions for minor drug offenses, is there any, and that was fairly recent, is there any sign that that is already having any effect, and is there a possibility that anyone would believe that that might be a first milestep toward, maybe potentially a big step toward helping?
Anybody want to pick it up on the panel?
You know, you're talking about what Eric Holder just...
Yes.
Right. So they had already been in motion with the Rockefeller laws, our Justice Department, to release folks who have been incarcerated for years for small amounts of cocaine and small amounts of marijuana. But you know, even with that, when it looks like they're giving us something, and someone may be able on this panel to tell you more about it, they're not really giving us much, because now with the focus of this war on terrorism and the war on Latinos here in the United States, they're building justice centers for Latinos and people they consider terrorists. Some of these confinement units we don't even know about. So when you say there's a number of people, 80,000 today in solitary confinement, we really don't know the numbers. There are people being held.
That number is about 10 years old.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. 80,000 is the number that has been tossed around, and I called Mark Maurer of the Sentencing Commission and said, please. I mean, we don't have a count on how many juveniles are in isolation. I've had horrific reports from county facilities, and there's no count on those. When you talked about corruption, I think we don't even begin to understand it. 6 months after Ojiri was released, he was arrested for endangering public transportation on an Amtrak train. Part of the discovery, he litigated, and part of the discovery that came out was an audio of a conversation between an assistant district attorney and the arresting officer, talking about ways they should have killed him because the case wasn't going anywhere. The judge dismissed the case for no evidence. And on this audio, the La Junta Colorado Police Department audios, for some reason, audio tapes every conversation. And here is this conversation, you know, we should have killed him. We should have said he had a gun. You know, we should have thrown him under the train. Assistant district attorney and the arresting police officer, so I hear you.
So when they give something, that's a small piece of the present day prison system. We know now with the drug war was a fraudulent setup where one of the first time crack dealers was set up right in front of the White House. I don't know if you know about that story where Reagan and the CIA set a dealer up, and he sold a big amount of crack right in front of the White House. So that began this big drug war, because that is all they had to increase the population in the prison system. They didn't have anything. We couldn't have got the 2 million with small time until they used small time dealers, and we know who the biggest drug dealers are here in the United States. So they had to combat a war on small-time dealers, which were mostly black and brown people. So now with terrorists, this war, they can take that population now to refill the prisons when they release some of these long-time sentences on the drug war. And now with the immigration laws, they're going to fill up those beds as soon as they release these small-time dealers.
I just recently found out about the solitary confinement, that is the issue that it is. And I'm just trying to figure out, how is this government allowing this to go on for 20, 30 years, individuals being, you know, in solitary confinement? What is, I mean, the federal, I mean, what is, I mean, is it some violation being committed? I mean, I just don't, you know, it's really like, really puzzling me that, you know, that individuals have been allowed to be kept in solitary confinement. I just purchased that Herman's house, and I say, what is the reason of keeping him locked up like that? I mean, why is this being allowed?
The government is paying for it. They subsidize the building of these isolation units. Herman had the nerve to form a Black Panther Party chapter inside. But the government is paying for it. And I think the other thing we all have to recognize is that Homeland Security is huge. And part of the presentation I didn't get a chance to give was that Homeland Security writes down everything, and you can read where they say they will stifle any kind of radicalization. Yep.
When you think of these prisoners who have been held for years, like Ojari, my dad, Joseph Bowen. These were revolutionaries who were fighting against injustice. Now, when people look at my dad, now my dad is finally being open to go into population. They just transferred him from our highest level of security prison, SCI Green, which is a level 7. My dad now is 70 years old. He's been put into SCI Frackville, which is a level 4. So we know eventually he's going in population. When, we don't know. Part of this thing with solitary confinement is to see how far can you go with these revolutionaries. Right. I told Daddy, I don't know why they doing this. I said, because you're a teacher. First of all, you're an educator. You're inside the prison telling these young boys how they've been set up with the drug war and every other, the lack of education, and these kids who want no education, no jobs, because you can get a prison cell before you get a book in school. So, Ojari, this is how I look at it, and my dad and other revolutionaries from the 60s and 70s are being studied. I think of how did he keep his mindset, where young kids who wind up in solitary confinement can kill themselves within an hour. No, there's no Facebook. There's no cell phone, and they lose it because we are touching people. And when you go without some form of communication for hours, they have studied these people. How did he do this 23 years in solitary confinement? How does Russell Shokes do it, and they are still standing where the youth now? And this is why I said earlier, they create these solitary confinement to quell uprising. The youth now that go in there, they so candy coated with reality TV, they have no uprising in them.
That's right, that's right.
Yes, I'm Pat with the Every Mother's Working Mother Network, and I wanted to first thank all the panels. I think they were excellent. And I wanted to say a little bit more about the fact that women are the largest, the growing population of people in prison, and to suggest an action item actually as well, because the rise in the numbers of women in prison has coincided with the welfare reform, which was passed in 1996, which ended welfare as any kind of entitlement and made it a work program, and it's really about punishing women and making the goal of welfare, pushing families off the welfare rolls at whatever cost. And so we think that's a really critical thing to look at here, and also because that in the passing the welfare reform was also about quelling the welfare rights movement, which was a way of breaking the backs of the movement and dividing people. And then right now there's a bill in Congress which we formed, and to speak to Tony's point, there's now a national and international grassroots network that's formed to to press for the value of the caregiving work that is done by mothers and others in society, and that we should be entitled to resources and support for that work, and should change all society's priorities to support that work. And here in this country, we have a bill called the Rise Out of Poverty Act that's currently in Congress. And it was introduced by Gwen Moore from Milwaukee, a former welfare mother herself, which I wanted to say that when, I think, Vicki, you said that in the women's prisons, or in prisons in general, they don't offer a chance to get a college education like the way they used to. That's also true for welfare. When they established the welfare reform, they took away any right to get a four-year college or education. And so you can see it's a very similar, part and parcel of the same thing going on here. And that with the Rise Out of Poverty Act, it would make ending child poverty the goal. It would raise benefit levels. It would end some of the most punitive aspects. It would allow a mother to go to college. It would start to make states accountable for reducing the numbers of kids put in foster care because of poverty. And it would really be a way to change that whole discussion away from charity or thinking of mothers and welfare as moochers. I'm a former welfare recipient myself. And that to really look at our entitlement and the fact that as mothers and caregivers, there's nothing more important in society than the work that is done in caring for people and raising children. So I think that that's a way that we want to, one way to address the issue of the growing population in prisons and women's prisons and in prisons in general is to look at how money is allocated and how we need support for that very basic work. So I hope that people here will sign our petition in support of the Rise Out of Poverty Act, because we really want to form a big movement to get that thing, to get it through in the present Congress. It's going to take a lot of work. So we're hoping people will sign on and ask for organizations to sign on and try to get it through Congress. And so I hope that people will support this.
Right, thank you.
If you think about Roxanne Jones,
Yeah.
who was awesome. I mean, a fighter for, same thing Pat Albright is talking now. If you look back at those times during her day, the women were strong, they were on welfare, but when there was an issue to be addressed against our Pennsylvania government, they were out there in force. They had to kill that movement because the welfare mothers was a big movement.
All over the country.
All over the country, yes. It was huge. And then they came out with this alleviation taken away, and there were lack of jobs. I do, when you talk about the police uprising and people who stood up against it, Pam Africa is here, we have to address that issue, how their family stood up against that type of uprising, and they tried with every might dropping bombs to get rid of them, but they are still, of course, here. But I never forget those babies that died there. Right. And it was because we know police are corrupt, but when you stand up against it, then they want to quiet your voice. So
then they become murderers.
And then they become murderers. Yes, that's the way to say it. So I have to acknowledge it, and Dr. Tony Monterio, who has given us an open voice at Temple University, at venues on the campus, and now they're trying to murder his voice and shut him down without allowing him to have any more positive events. And he can maybe tell you something about that before this event is over. Oh, Pat, Vickers.
Well, there's one over there. We'll just
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
right here.
I'm not going to say anything else.
Hello, everybody. I'm Raza Khan Shahid. I'm with the Philadelphia Innocent Project. I better not say that. I'm being sued by the Innocent Project because once you start telling the truth, and all I said was, no, not Pennsylvania, I'm the Philadelphia Innocent Project. If it don't be for me, it wouldn't be no Pennsylvania Innocent Project. And the problem is, when you start telling the truth, you're in trouble. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, all over America. And it's the judges, not just the police, the judges allow this. And we allow them to do it because we don't say nothing about it. The FOP put judges in, and we just sit back and don't do nothing. I will be, well, I won't really be fighting all that much as far as, because Barry Shack and all of them, they got a load of money. And all I said was, the Pennsylvania Innocent Project, they first, they first event fundraised, they raised $500,000 and got nobody out of jail. And that's the truth. You know what I'm saying? And I asked, what's his name? Richard, what's the individual that heads the Pennsylvania Innocent Project? Glasser. I asked him, what would you do if an individual give you a case and the person that's on your board is the one that sent him to jail? And I got the lawyer's name. But that made me start thinking, how many other lawyers on this board is going to stop them guys from coming back to court? You know what I mean?
Thanks.
Well spoken, brother.
That's a strong point, man.
Yeah.
Those in the room who know me have heard this, what I'm going to say, before. And that is that we need everybody in here, while we're worrying and stewing and fretting about the racism that has taken over this country. Let's think very strongly about our children, because they have now very few models except the punitive model, the one that says, well, if you do this, you're going to prison. And our children have lost their way. Last year, my group, the mass incarceration group of Germantown meeting, went to visit CFCF. The picture that I saw that day has stayed with me every day since. Here was a room full of people, almost as big as this room we're in. People with parents, I'm going to say most of them were parents, with children on their laps by their side, all women, waiting for a chance to visit their male relatives in prison. And I cannot figure out what kind of a picture we want to take away from that for our children. We're sitting here in this wonderful setting of the school that I love so dearly. We need to help all of us raise our children. When Michelle Alexander says this is the new Jim Crow, I'm fond of saying this is not the new Jim Crow. This is the old Jim Crow warmed over for our babies.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Celine Kamen, and I work with Carolyn Hill and DHS Give Us Back Our Children. And I guess, what I'm really interested in, as I hear many of you and everyone here is trying to figure out how to draw the connections and make the connections and organize over this, and both internationally and also through all our issues. And there were many things that have been said, and as Carolyn said, we see this the incarceration of children on many different levels. Carolyn and I had to take her one-year-old niece, who was taken away from her in court and put into basically a solitary confinement glass enclosure at DHS with a man in a suit who she never saw before, and we had to watch her turn around and all of a sudden realize that the only family member that had been caring for her at the time was separated by the glass, just like, So, and that's what I see is all these so
you know, and what we're talking about here, and that, I mean, just the similarities between all our different struggles are incredible to me, and that's what we see. Carolyn is speaking out, and so the powers that be who don't want to admit their mistakes and can't stand that somebody is speaking up, you know, they're trying to push her down. Also the people that are involved are multinational corporations, some of the largest Swiss bank financiers. These are people that are involved in the child welfare system now, and the people who sent lawyers to a court hearing to say Carolyn could not even speak, just like the prisoners who they're not letting speak and put in solitary confinement. So, you know, what I see is happening here is a system that is being, you know, many are being herded into, and then those that are brave enough to speak out are being silenced in whatever way possible. And yeah, we need to draw all the lines, and especially with women in prison. I know Vicki Law can tell you a lot more about the mothers in prison and pregnant women in prison, how they have to birth their children in prison, and then what happens to the children afterwards and the mothers. So there's just so many different issues that we need to connect.
Thank you.
Yes, well, when it comes to dishonesty in the police force, I don't know how many, I mean, obviously a large portion of the population isn't aware of it, a good considerable portion is, but it's remarkable how blasé some of them are about it, because I had heard about this, notably Bill Maher mentioned it on his television show, actually they had a nickname for it, Test-A-Line, but I actually overheard something. And the remarkable thing was not that they were doing it, that someone was talking about it in public, and they didn't even have any self-consciousness about doing it. A number of years ago, I heard one cop thanking another for what he had said on the stand. He said, "Oh, it was just a story." One thing that irritates me, speaking of the way they try to suppress any kind of accountability of the police, is they try to keep you from taking and recording what they're doing. Now the police department officially has come down and said that you have a permission to photograph what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing in practice. But Kevin Powell, who won the nominations of both major capitalist political parties for a judicial position, he actually ruled against someone who had his camera taken from him. He tried to take pictures of police, and he actually said to this guy, if you want a career in photography, you should take pictures of people kissing in front of a love sculpture, not police officers. So unfortunately, he won both capitalist parties' political nomination. So no one's running against him. I think I'm going to write in the name of the person who ruled against him. It's the best thing I can do.
What's his name?
I'm next.
Oh, sorry. Oh, my name is Eric Hamill. I live in Ward 59, Division 21. I'm actually running for Inspector of Elections, the Green Party's candidate.
What's the name of the...
Oh, the judge, oh, I'm sorry. Ken Powell is this judge who's on both major party ballots this fall. It was reported in the city paper several months ago, in a story about citizen videographers.
You use a particular term with the T. What is that? What is that?
Test-A-Line.
Oh, Test-A-Line. Okay, gotcha.
Hi, my name is Madeline, and I started working for Philadelphia Fights Institute for Community Justice, and I just wanted to share a couple things that might be of interest to people in this room. The first was already mentioned. It's this film called Herman's House that follows the story of a man who was confined to solitary confinement for 40 years, and a woman who asked him basically if you could live in any house, what would that look like? So that's being shown at International House on October 17th at 6 p.m. and I put some flyers out in the lobby if anyone's interested. The other thing is I am running the Support Center for Prison Advocacy at the Institute for Community Justice, and some of the things I'm interested in, basically I will be doing community organizing around criminal justice issues. I haven't completely decide what this is going to look like, but I'm interested in maybe mobilizing people around demanding compliance with Ban the Box initiative, which is a Philadelphia initiative that makes it illegal for employers to ask about criminal history in the job application or the first interview. It's something that's a law but has not been followed at all. And I mean, issues like that of making re-entry easier and rehabilitation possible for people coming out of the prison system. So if you have any resources or just want to talk to me, I would really love to talk to you. I will be hanging around for a little while after this.
Hi, my name is Carlin. So I guess because of the number of times that the idea of young people and their role has come up, I can't help but think about the fact so there's no young people in this room who are of speaking age, so they obviously can't speak for themselves in here right now. And I guess just something I've kind of noticed across the board, I don't think it's fair to call myself young people. I'm 26, but not a kid, not in high school. So I guess to me, I can't help but notice the language we use in talking about young people, and kind of thinking about, well, what opportunities do they have to take up any kind of different identities if we are only referring to them as oh, they're stuck on Facebook or they're stuck on front of the TV and all these TV shows. And I guess I work with young people, and for me, I don't see kids who are completely I guess blind to what's going on. They see what's going on, but I guess to me, I think something that we should be considering and trying to kind of work on is how do we teach them a way to talk about the things that they're seeing, not just, sit down and have a little communication session, but how do they even have the language? So you're saying kids today aren't revolutionary or whatever. I've heard other people say that. And so my question is, well, when did any of us become revolutionary? Did we just, just talk the same language that everyone around us has been talking? Or did we have to change the way we speak about our world? And I guess, so all I'm saying is for young people, we need to find ways to help them talk about what's going on around them and question what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We had AFSC had a youth project a few years ago, and just on impulse, I took the kids one by one and asked them what their experiences were in juvenile detention. This whole youth project, it was 3 years old, and nobody had ever asked them. And what came out of their mouths formed a book called Our Children's House and a play called Our Children's House. They have so much to teach us. So I thank you very much.
A lot of my education come from the prisoners. I call them my professors. And my father asked me years ago to take on youth, and I convinced my employer to let me out an hour early. I was working at a school 8 years. I went in the community and said free after school program for youth who are having a number of issues, sex, how they are described in their community, have loved ones in prison. No one took me up. When my dad called that Sunday, I said, no one took me up. He said, take the prison off the fly. People are hiding, like I say, women who go to church are some of the biggest group of families who have loved ones in prison or in the church, but they're hiding behind church hats and don't want to acknowledge that they have loved ones in. So people didn't want to hear about the prison. Every kid, I got 9 kids I hung around with for 2 years after school. So there are kids who, until you bring them under your wing, we don't have enough people who are willing to bring kids under their wing and really teach them how this system is being ran against our youth. I took in 11 kids in my home in 1 year, foster care program. And I gave them all an excellent ground base. But what I discovered was with these complaints about DHS, that the whole system is geared around to put the kid on medication. And I said, what the hell if this kid don't need medication, one of my kids? And the kid said, Miss Teresa, I'm not crazy, I just miss my mother. 6 years old, and they almost put me out of the foster care because I wouldn't give him the medicine. So they took him out of my home. He's medicated now. He's committed all kind of offenses in the public school system now since he's got the medicine. Once you get the medicine now, you get put into a whole nother category. You're no longer considered a public school, a regular student. Now you're considered potential student for reform. Soon as you get the medicine. And this kid now, when I see him at the foster care home, he can't even properly talk. Where he was this excellent, bright kid, when he goes to say, hi, Miss Teresa, I love you, he said, hi. And he tries to hug me, and I have to bring his arm around me to hug me. The kid only missed his mother, but now he's potential package for the prison system.
Not potential.
I wanted to ask Attorney, you're representing the mentally ill behind solitary. What about the prisoners that become mentally ill from solitary confinement?
Well, the case would affect anybody who is in solitary that eventually gets a diagnosis. But part of what we hope will happen is that they'll do a much better job of actually identifying people that have mental illness or potentially would decompensate in a setting like solitary, so that they would not actually ever go into solitary in the first instance. So it's hard, it's not exact science for sure, but people who are potentially harmed by solitary that may not have a current diagnosis, we would want to protect from going into.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Been reliably informed that we have 4 more people. All right. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Nicholson, member of the Quaker meeting across the way there. Really appreciate the opportunity to hear from our panel that the whole issue needs a great deal of further exploration and discussion. Just to follow up on the issue that Ross raised a little bit ago about the picking up usually kids who have a small amount of marijuana. I wonder if it isn't time for us as a society to say that the war on drugs has failed. We don't hear about it much in the media now, but the war is still going on, and people are out killing each other because there's so much money involved in drugs. And it seems to me it's time for us to explore what would happen, what would be the ramifications if we at least decriminalized drugs. I'm sure we're not ready as a country to say, well, drugs are legal. There are only a handful of states now that have allowed marijuana for medical reasons. And marijuana was added to the list of dangerous drugs just by a pure accident back in the 30s. But it's a major problem, and it involves many people, as I said before, killing each other. And it's so active because it's so profitable. And we have to look at that. In the meantime, I think the more that we can educate ourselves about the total prison population, including solitary confinement, the better off we'll be. So thanks again for this opportunity.
Hi, I'm Dean Kendall. I work with the Payday Men's Network with Eric here. We work with the Global Women's Strike and Every Mother. It's a working mother network. And we organized with the last number of years. We have a Refusing Pill website. We organized with military people who refuse to kill, maim, and rape for the U.S. military, and including most recently Bradley Chelsea Manning. I don't know if folks here know the young whistleblower who exposed the U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq. A number of people talking about, this has to be a global movement, and that's a big connection. We need whistleblowers like in the military. We need whistleblowers in the prison system. I mean, the prisoners are the first whistleblowers, but it wouldn't hurt to have some of the other people, the people who work there for a paycheck, and also like in DHS, and we need to support our whistleblowers. Yeah.
I just also want to point out that a lot of those refuseniks are held in solitary confinement within military, but that's probably the point.
Yeah,
I also, before you call on the next speaker, Chris, one thing Bonnie said too is that the war on drugs was actually successful because it did what it was supposed to do, which was incarcerate people. So, but but your point is well taken about decriminalizing. I also want to say too, because I know some people are leaving, please do not leave without signing the pledge sheet outside that you will do something, be in touch, connect, add your email legibly so we can read it, and so we can carry on.
Wanted to do a little follow-up. Rosa Khan was saying something about the Innocence Project. Quite often I find that projects as such don't fully, quite often, address the needs of inmates or their families. I think the problem is that, and not about you specifically, but lawyers sometimes think that they know everything and how to go about everything. That's absolutely untrue. What has to happen is that we have to hold every organization that says that they're part of the fighting against this injustice, we have to hold them accountable, and they have to include us into the process, whether it be mental health or any other thing that we have to deal with. In terms of the police corruption, we need to force the government to hold public hearings. Karen and I were talking to the incarcerated PA about pushing for public hearings on the criminal justice system. We're talking about bad police, bad DAs. My son just got sentenced to life for homicide he did not commit. And part of the reason he was sentenced is because the police had fabricated evidence. It was clearly fabricated. But the judge said, hey, it's okay. So we have to hold these judges accountable, these rotten cops, and the DA's office. Because she just said they're committing murder. They're murdering people. Do we understand the significance of what's going on here? When a judge sentences someone to prison for life, when a judge gives someone the death penalty, they'll say, well, I'm just doing this because it's a state law. No, you are murdering people. And we need to call them what they are. We need to educate our communities to let them know that they are murdering people. Murdering, killing people. And we need to hold them accountable. They should be run out of office. They shouldn't even be talked to. They shouldn't be allowed in any community events. Stop going to see these bums, giving them respect. They don't deserve any respect because they are mass murderers.
Just one comment, and again with due respect to lawyers who take cases, very difficult cases, trying to get people out of isolation. I work closely with ACLUs and the Center for Constitutional Rights, and what they do is they, forgive me, take the low-hanging fruit, and I've heard them say that. They take the mentally ill cases, and they take the cases of juveniles in isolation. Not that there have been any resounding successes, but they don't touch the politics of isolation. They don't touch the political people who are in isolation, the jailhouse lawyers, the Muslims who are in isolation. There's no litigation going on with those.
Can I just also want to say, I don't know if Pamela you were going to say something, but somebody we really need to recognize from the floor is Mumia Abu Jamal, who was held in solitary confinement for I don't know how many years, and who's now, as a result of the movement, been put in general population. The movement wants him out, but at least he's off of death row.
One more, and then I wanted to solicit reactions to the artwork around us. I mean, people have comments.
We need to go to
Please forward. Wait a minute, haven't you spoken already?
Yeah, I wanted to just respond to her youth, because I have a very important part to say.
Make it very short.
In Philadelphia, there's a Philadelphia Youth Court that's coming out now. We would like you to support it because we're talking about solutions. You know, we're complaining, but we're talking about solutions. So in Washington, D.C. last year, their youth court saved them $2 million. So it's all about community self-government, like I said before. So the DA is open to youth court here, and we just started it, Magistrate Francine Daniels. And what it does is any young folks that get in trouble for stealing a computer, getting caught with weed, any kind of infractions that we say we don't like our children getting locked up for, they can now go to youth court, be adjudicated by youth of their peers that have been certified in the youth court process, and they would avert jail. So I don't have a long time to speak about it, but I'm about solutions. It's community self-government. Please support Philadelphia Youth Court so that no more young folks will go to prison for minor infractions. And I'll let the floor go.
Thank you.
Okay. Most people said everything, but I wanted to talk about an elder sister that's in prison in Muncie. And Brother Razakan has the details on her. She's blind, she has no family, she's up for to be able to come home, but she don't have a home to come to, so they're holding her, in prison. And, whoever I can talk to about this, about helping to get this lady out of prison. She's in Muncie. She's in Muncie, yes. And another thing, like dealing with people that's in prison that don't go in on drugs but start writing up write-ups and winning cases in the prison. Razakan himself was a victim, and the reason why they don't want people like Russell out is an example. Brother Smitty, he was a Panther who just passed not too long ago. Razakan didn't know him, but the prison was giving them some kind of drugs, and Razakan did not know that, his whole mindset was being changed. Smitty saw that, and he warned him and told him, what to do and things. So, he's here today in good mind, because of a brother like Smitty, who was a Panther, who saw a problem. And, this is what they do. They educate other people to see problems and to help people through it. So, the importance of our political prisoners, and, other people that, reach out to, our community of children, loved ones that's in jail. And, we got to constantly back them up. And we got to do the work to get Russell out into general population. My family been in jail over 35 years now, are eligible for parole for some time. And one thing we know, the only way you can do this is to continue to fight. And when it look rough, you fight harder. You don't back. And sometimes you're gonna be there by yourself fighting. And but continue, just to go and hit at these people, real hard. Mumia's 60th birthday is coming up, April the 24th, and it's going to be a huge event here in Philadelphia. And I would like to invite people here, and because we're dealing with the prison industrialization complex, we want to have a whole block dealing with that. There's going to be people coming in from outside the country, across the country. So we want people involved in there. The issue of our children and our DHS is all one issue. So I want to get together with people and to form something real huge, because the eyes of the world is going to be right here, during that Mumia Jamal weekend. So we got to make it exactly what it should be, informative and something with solution and what people can lead with. Okay, I thank you on the move.
Thank you. Thank you, and I'd like to thank the audience and yeah, well, I think while we have the audience, we should mention the co-sponsors that include the Center for Returning Citizens, Decarcerate Pennsylvania, Disability Rights Network of Pennsylvania, Every Mother is a Working Mother Network, Human Rights Coalition, Payday Men's Network, Peace Home Campaigns, and Peace and Social Concerns of the Germantown Monthly Meeting. And we also want to thank Bread and Roses for contributing to the funding of this event. So thank you very much. There's probably additional food and drink out there. Right. And please, we do want to hear comments about the artwork.